It's Saturday the 12th of August. A week ago I came down and I saw the Birdhide flooded, which is what I wanted to see how it behaved when the river burst at the banks. And today I'm back down for a couple of days to create the window frame, because I want to do it kind of artistically as well as functionally. And I thought long and hard about whether to use glass or perspex, so I've used the more expensive polystyrene actually. And I spent some time trying to find out what was the best glue, because I want to join a nice clean join without a framework on the corner. So I brought down a few bits of wood that I pre-machined in my workshop to make up a framework, obviously made them oversized. I also brought down some hinges. And the other thing, if you've been watching this series of videos, you've been seeing that I've used a lot of cordless tools. I'd be lost without cordless power tools, but there's one cordless power tool that evades me, the cordless glue gun. So I have brought down my corded glue gun, but I'm having to link it up to a generator. So that's extra weight to bring down to site. I'm allowing a couple of days. You know, the biggest challenge is creating an accurate checklist of what is needed on site, you know, considering there's a 130-mile journey, because I always forget something. And what did I forget this time? The memory card, the micro memory card to go in my camcorder. So you're wondering, how am I filming this? Well, I've had to take the card out of my drone. It's so easy forgetting stuff, and isn't it funny how I forgot this, almost the smallest item that I needed, a micro SD card. Not a lot of room in here. What I first got to do is cut away the foil, which is protecting against rain. Don't want that floating down the river. Okay, that will do for the moment. And the idea is that this piece is the framework. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to do it from the outside. One of the things I'll leave in the Birdhide is the spirit level, because I don't want it to sink unevenly as the ground gets sodden every time it floods. Oh, I've just noticed it says for interior use only. Oh well, I'll have to see. I don't think it's going to be in any direct sunlight. Okay, so there's quite a lot of going up and down to build the window. It's going to be recessed. Now, I had cut these much longer just to give myself some leeway, so I'm going to cut them back now to just above the bar that goes across here, and then the window, which I've hooked up here for the moment. It's all very delicate stuff, but the window, instead of hinging, I'm going to pivot, so it will pivot like that. So I'm kind of designing this as I go along. It's great fun. What I've got to prevent is stuff from falling off from this height. Okay, well, it's about 4:30. I've been at it solidly all day and it's clouding over a bit, so what I've done is a bit unconventional. I didn't use the hot melt glue gun with my generator that I brought down. I used a quick set epoxy. In fact, while I'm talking, it's setting. But my target was to get the main window up today, and it's really beginning to take form. I mean, this is the icing on the cake for this Birdhide. Once I've done the window, I then can think about lining the inside with pine, and I've got a lovely technique of grooving it with a radial arm saw to get that extra groove down a 4-inch wide board. I think it's the French method, but it just looks so classy, or so much more classy. So yeah, and of course I'm using this small roofing square to get the vertical right, but also to help hold it in place, because the square is actually running along the groove, the glazed groove, so it's not going to go anywhere, and it's acting as a support while the quickset epoxy goes off. And then I will reinforce the frame of the window and the window itself with screws afterwards. But note my method: I glue it first because that locates it, and then I screw afterwards, because if you screw into end grade, the chances are it will drift slightly and the framework will be out of flush. So all these little methods really add up, they really make a difference. So I'm going to let it set overnight. I'm not going to be tempted to start working it in half an hour's time. I think there's a gig on later that I'm going to go to. Okay, this is day 2, and what I'm doing is completing the window. I've done the pivoting glazed part, and the important thing is to get the glazing in line, because when the sunlight reflects, if it's slightly out, that will show far more than the framework being slightly out of 90 degrees. Now what I've done here is I've jammed a thin piece of plywood as a kind of temporary clamp to align the top framework, which I've mitered here. Don't know whether you can see it. Ready to take the piece that goes down there in order to glaze this right angle piece. That should be fun, and it'll probably take me most of today to do this, and then hopefully it will be a really neat job. These are my temporary improvised supports for working on the framework, because otherwise I'm just kind of running up and down the ladder every 2 minutes. Okay, and now I'm going to measure or mark off the trying to hold the camera in place at the same time as step off the mark. I have a feeling I should be, yeah, I'm going to move the ladder round to the end and do that. The beauty of having this cordless chop saw is I can trim exactly to the line, the marked line, the various parts of the window frame. Okay, well I'm left-handed, so let's have a go with my right hand. The only problem with this polystyrene sheet is, although it's very easy to cut, you really have to take the protective film off while the sheet's fairly new. I've got some of the sheet that's over 10 years old, and the film just will not come off. Well, day 2, it's about 2 o'clock, mid-afternoon, and I'm on schedule. I suppose it probably sounds a bit arrogant to say this, but there's hardly anything in wood that I can't make. I mean, I've been making things in wood since I was 17. I got my GCE A level and got a grade A in just 2 terms instead of 2 years. So I was very lucky. I discovered a flair for woodworking at an early age. So here I am using a tenon saw upside down. It just seems quicker to get that last little bit of groove cut out so that I can slide in the glazing plastic. So it's fairly fiddly, but I've allowed 2 days just to build and fit the window. So this is a real, great feature of this Birdhide. Okay, now look, it'll take me too long to explain how I make the last wedge piece of glass, but suffice to say that I'm using a thin piece of plywood as a template, and I will take I'll copy the distances This is a bit fiddly because I'm perched on top of a ladder holding the camcorder in the wrong hand to try and describe with the other hand what I'm doing. But suffice to say that I've hardly used a ruler or a tape measure in this whole project, so do have a look at my video why I never use a ruler. And this is the last glazed piece of plastic for the Birdhide. Oh, that's fairly tight. There you are. And I want to get a nice butt joint there with an adhesive so that, you know, it's just a nice detail. Wrap brown piece of glass. Okay, so what I'm doing is with this part template, I'm transferring the data onto the piece of polystyrene. I put masking tape on so that I can do nice clear biro marks, and I've got to do that plus the depth of cut. Check that's there. That plus the depth of cut. So for a guideline or a projection line, I'm just going to do a dotted line because I don't want to cut to that line, and then I'm going to add extra for the depth of groove, which is about 3 mil, and then very importantly, you shade waste. You should always shade waste, so we know exactly what line we're cutting to. And I've got one more line, which is this little one at the bottom. By sheer coincidence, the offcut that I've got from the half sheet of polystyrene is exactly big enough. That's unbelievable. And now I'm going to use a little circular saw with a reasonably fine tooth blade to saw this off. Hope I've got this right, because this is the only bit of plastic I've got left now, so you have to get it right first time. And the last little bit is too small to use the portable circular saw, so I'm going to do it by hand. And there we are, fingers crossed. One last little feature is I'm going to just taper the edge very, very slightly with a smoothing plane. A nice healthy zip. Well, with a minor bit of fiddling around, I've got pretty well a perfect fit. And while I remember, I'm going to take the glazed pieces out and treat it with preservative before I seal them in. It'll also darken up the colour a little bit. I am tired and I'm actually sitting down for the first time today, so I'm just on the inside finishing off the weatherproofing. I should really have done this one before I glazed it. All this detail around here, this interior trim, I will be doing later on, together with hopefully some pine panelling. Already I'm thinking of bits of furniture that I can, like seats that I can clamp on to the poles, so that when I'm down by the river I can have a really comfortable seat, and obviously not leave it down here, but just clamp it into position or hook it over. I've yet to design it. And, you know, and have things like a picnic table that is cantilevered off one of the poles. So it just shows how creative design is, and I hope it helps inspire you to design and build your own projects.